My name is Cordelia Harper, and if you'd asked me 10 years ago where I'd be today, I'd have laughed and said, anywhere but here. But here I am, standing on the cracked stone pathway of my parents' Georgian-style house, the one I secretly own, the one they still believe is theirs. It's strange how a single piece of paper, an agreement signed in desperation, can shift the ground beneath a whole family. The wind is cruel this morning, smacking loose strands of my hair across my cheek. I don't flinch. I welcome the sting. It reminds me I'm not the same girl who left town with 2 suitcases and a check that wouldn't cover my rent. Back then, I was invisible, a daughter who never quite measured up to her golden brother Alistair. He's probably inside right now, probably pacing their formal dining room, the one with the walnut table polished so fiercely it reflects your sins back at you. He'll be barking orders on a phone call, or maybe, more likely, plotting new ways to remind me that this house, this family, this entire world was never meant for me. I press my thumb against the doorbell. Its chime echoes through the entryway like a funeral toll. For a moment, I think about leaving, about turning around, walking the length of the stone path, getting back in my car, and driving until the ghosts disappear in the rearview mirror. But I won't. I can't. Because everything I've built, every dollar, every deal, every betrayal I swallowed like vinegar, has led to this front porch. I hear footsteps inside. A shuffle, then the door swings open. It's Mother, Jacqueline Harper. Everyone calls her Jackie, but only when they're not within earshot. Her face is a map of tight lines and false warmth, the kind that never reaches her eyes. She's wearing a silk blouse tucked into tailored trousers. She looks like she's about to attend a gala, not answer the door for her only daughter. Cordelia, she says. The name lands heavy, as if she hasn't spoken it in years. Maybe she hasn't. To what do we owe this visit? I force a smile. Good morning, Mother. May I come in? She hesitates, her eyes flicking to my car parked at the curb. She's looking for evidence. Of who might be watching? Who might see her daughter standing here unannounced? She steps aside just enough for me to slip through. The house smells the same. Polished wood, a hint of roses from the vase on the foyer table, and underneath it all, the faint mildew of old money rotting from the inside out. I step into the living room. The grandfather clock ticks like a heartbeat that wants to quit. Father is there, perched in his leather chair by the window. Bernard Harper, a man who used to tower over me even when seated. Now, age has made him shrink, but his eyes still cut the same. He lowers his paper without bothering to hide his frown. Cordelia, he says, his voice a gruff warning. You didn't call ahead. I didn't realize I needed an appointment, I say. My words bounce off the marble fireplace and settle into the silence between us. From the corner, a movement. Alistair. He's lounging against the piano, his tailored suit too sharp for a Sunday morning. He lifts his glass of scotch as if to toast me. Well, look who the cat dragged in, he drawls. Did you come to borrow more money, Dee? The nickname slices at me. Dee. He's the only one who still uses it, twisting it into something patronizing. I hold his gaze and feel that old, familiar heat behind my ribs. Not anger. Resolve. Actually, I came to talk about your plans, I say, for the business. Father grunts. The business is not your concern, Cordelia. It never was. Mother sits on the sofa, crossing her legs at the ankle like she's posing for a family portrait. Your brother is handling it. And doing such a stellar job, I say. I shouldn't bait them this early, but the words spill out before I can catch them. Tell me, Alistair, how are the new investors? He smirks. We don't need investors. The Harpers have always managed just fine on our own. I let out a quiet laugh. Managed? You mean the loans? The second mortgage you took on this house? Or the debts you keep rolling over every quarter to keep the lights on? Father slams his palm onto the armrest. How dare you? Don't! I snap. The word shatters the room's stale air. Don't talk to me like I'm still 17 and clueless. I know everything. The overdue payments. The suppliers waiting months for checks that bounce. The staff you keep stringing along with promises you can't keep. Mother's hand trembles just slightly. How do you know this? Because, I say, stepping closer, I own the mortgage on this house. And half the debts the company owes, they're owed to me. For a heartbeat, the world stops. Father's jaw goes slack. Alistair's glass freezes midair. Mother's eyes dart to me, then to father, then back to me like she's reading a language she never learned. That's impossible, father says, but it's not conviction. It's prayer. It's very possible, I say. When you needed money 5 years ago, you borrowed from a holding company you didn't bother to investigate. That holding company is mine. The name's different. The paperwork is complicated. But at the end of the day, every check you sign is made out to me. Alistair's face twists into something ugly. You think you can just waltz in here and take what's ours? No, I say, my voice quiet but sharp enough to bleed. I'm here to take what's mine. Silence. It stretches, pulls tight like a wire about to snap. Father's breathing turns shallow. Mother's hand covers her mouth. Alistair steps forward, so close I can smell the scotch on his breath. You ungrateful little... Careful, I say, you're standing on my floorboards. He recoils. I watch the realization sink in. Everything they thought they owned, every chandelier, every monogrammed towel, every antique hidden away for a better day, it's all mine. And now they know. Father tries to stand, but his knees betray him. Mother moves to help him, but he brushes her off. What do you want, Cordelia? I take a breath. Outside, the wind knocks a loose branch against the window. It sounds like fate knocking, demanding to be let in. I want the truth, I say. About what you did. About why you chose him. I want my share of the business. I want what's rightfully mine. And I want you to know, I'm done being your backup plan. Mother's voice is a brittle whisper. You can't do this. I already did, I say. The question is, what are you going to do now? Outside, a car door slams. Another branch hits the glass. Father's hands tremble on the armrest. Alistair's eyes narrow to slits, calculating. I feel the shift in the air, that spark of danger. I know them well enough to see it. They won't go down without a fight. But neither will I. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. I stood there in the living room of the house I owned. Their house, our house, though the word felt hollow now, while the echoes of my last words rattled around the walls like an alarm no one knew how to silence. My brother's glare didn't waver. If anything, it sharpened. I could almost see the gears grinding behind his pale eyes, see him mapping out how to spin this to his advantage. I'd known Alistair would be the hardest to break. Father coughed, a raw, rasping sound that made Mother flinch. She perched on the arm of his chair, her hand hovering near his shoulder but never quite touching. Like if she made contact, she'd have to feel the weight of everything falling apart. I didn't move. I let them look at me like I was the crack in their foundation because, in truth, I was. I had become the thing they never saw coming. How long? Father's voice trembled with the effort to stay authoritative. How long have you been waiting to throw this in our faces? I looked at the antique clock above the mantel, one of the few pieces I knew Mother would sell if she could pry it from the wall. 5 years, give or take, I said softly. Since the first loan. Mother's mouth opened and closed. She was too proud to ask how I'd done it. She'd always assumed my life was a string of failures barely worth acknowledging. And maybe for a while it was. Until it wasn't. Alistair scoffed. Well, isn't this dramatic? You come back here with your smug little grin. I'm not smiling, Alistair. I cut in, my voice a low hiss. Don't mistake this for joy. This is survival. We're family, he sneered, pushing himself off the piano and stalking closer. Family doesn't do this to each other. Family. I repeated the word, tasting its bitterness. Family didn't give me a choice. Mother's voice was sharp. Don't be so melodramatic, Cordelia. You could have come home, asked for help. Help? My laugh scraped my throat raw. Like when you told me college was a waste of money? When you refused to co-sign my first lease because it might affect Alistair's credit? When you told me if I wanted to start my business, I could figure it out myself? Father flinched at that one. I let it hang there. The truth between us was always ugly. Alistair smirked, folding his arms. So what now, little sister? You going to evict your own parents? Sell the house out from under us? No, I said, steady. I want the business. I want my seat at the table you locked me out of. Mother bristled. You don't know anything about running it. I know enough. I shot back. Enough to know you can't run it without me anymore. You've burned every bridge you ever built. Investors don't trust you. Banks laugh at you. Suppliers mark up their invoices because they know you're desperate. I stepped closer to Alistair, close enough to see the flush of anger staining his neck. And you, dear brother, you're too busy patting your pockets and throwing whiskey at your problems to fix any of it. His jaw clenched. Watch it, Cordelia. Or what? I asked. You'll do what you did in college? Try to ruin my reputation? Spread more lies? Leak more half-truths? You're not 17 anymore, Alistair. People know who you are. They see you for exactly what you are. His hand twitched at his side, and for a second I wondered if he'd actually swing at me. But he didn't. He just smiled that cold, empty smile. Fine. Say we believe you. What do you really want? Father grunted. We're not entertaining this. You don't have a choice, I said, my voice flat. I own your mortgage. If you default, I'll foreclose. I'll sell it to someone who'll turn this place into a golf course or a hotel, and you'll be lucky if they let you stay on as the groundskeepers. Mother gasped. You wouldn't dare? Try me, I snapped. But that's not what I want. I want the company put in my name. I want 51%. Alistair can keep his title. He can keep pretending to run things while I fix his messes. But the final say will be mine. Alistair's laugh was sharp as a knife. And if we say no, then you find somewhere else to live, I said. Because the next loan payment is due in 6 weeks and I won't extend the grace period. Father buried his face in his hands. The silence that followed was deafening. The only sound was the grandfather clock marking time none of us could ever get back. Finally, Mother's eyes met mine. You've become very cruel, Cordelia. I let the words wash over me. You made me this way. We stood like that for what felt like hours. Just a handful of broken people trapped in a house that wasn't big enough to contain all our resentments. I felt something shift inside me. Not satisfaction, not regret. Something deeper, raw, like an old wound cracking open to heal for the first time. Father cleared his throat, voice rough. We'll need time to discuss this. Take all the time you like, I said, stepping back. Just remember, time is the one thing you're running out of. I turned and walked out before they could say another word, my heels clicking against the marble floor like a countdown. Outside, the wind bit at my cheeks again, but this time it felt different. It felt clean, free. I'd struck the first blow. Now the real fight would begin. At my car, I looked back at the house, my house. The curtains shifted. I wondered if Alistair was already on the phone, scheming. I almost hoped he was. It would make beating him that much sweeter. I climbed in, started the engine, and let the roar drown out the sound of my heart hammering in my chest. I had battles to plan, alliances to make, and if they thought they could push me out again, they were about to learn just how dangerous their forgotten daughter could be. The war for everything was just beginning. When I woke the next morning, my phone was already blinking with missed calls. Unknown numbers, old contacts, even one from a lawyer I'd never met, but whose name was scrawled in Alistair's neat, arrogant handwriting at the bottom of so many of the company's questionable contracts. It was almost impressive, really, how fast they'd started their counterattack. I half expected it. That was how the Harpers survived, by cornering every threat, then gutting it from the inside out. But I wasn't 17 anymore, begging for scraps at the family table. Now, I was the table. I didn't answer any calls. Instead, I stood at the window of my downtown flat, a bright, modern apartment worlds away from that cold old house, and watched the traffic crawl by like a sluggish river. My coffee went cold on the counter. I had decisions to make, moves to plan. I needed to see the books for myself, not the carefully edited balance sheets they'd always shown the banks and investors. The real ones, the ones buried under fake invoices and creative accounting tricks. I needed to know exactly how deep the rot went. A knock at my door jolted me out of my thoughts. For a heartbeat, a stupid part of me expected to see Mother there, somehow transformed overnight into someone capable of an apology. But when I opened it, it was Julianne. Julianne Rourke had been my best friend once, until I left town without telling her why. We'd reconnected years later when she found me in a cramped coffee shop after one of her corporate law lectures. Now she was the closest thing I had to family. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. "They called me," she said, brushing past me into my apartment. "Your brother, your mother, even that snake Franklin who pretends to be their lawyer but who can't file a motion without screwing up the signature page." I raised an eyebrow. What did they want? She dropped her leather bag on my couch, pulling out her laptop. "To scare me. To scare you. Alistair offered me a retainer twice my rate to get me to drop you. Can you believe that?" I almost laughed. "Did you take it?" Julianne shot me a look. "Please. I'm insulted he thought that would work." I sank onto the couch next to her. "It's starting already." "It is," she said, fingers already flying over the keyboard. "So let's get ahead of it. We need to know exactly what you're up against." I pulled the last 5 years of public filings. They're a mess. Lots of double-dipping, shell vendors, payments to a ghost account that's definitely offshore. I swallowed the nausea that bubbled up. "Do you think he's siphoning?" "I'd bet my license on it," Julianne said. "But we need proof, hard proof." I nodded. "Then we'll get it." She gave me a tight smile. That's the Cordelia I know. The next few days blurred into a fever dream of spreadsheets, old invoices, and phone calls to people I hadn't spoken to in years. Former employees, forgotten suppliers, even the janitor who used to slip me leftover pastries from the break room when I'd show up as a teenager, desperate for some hint of what it would be like to belong. Piece by piece, the truth emerged. The numbers painted a picture so rotten it almost made me dizzy. Alistair hadn't just mismanaged the business. He'd been bleeding it dry, covering losses with more loans, lining his pockets while the staff got paid late and the buildings fell apart. And all the while my parents sat there, blind or willfully ignorant, so long as their precious son kept telling them what they wanted to hear. One night, Julianne and I sat cross-legged on my living room floor, surrounded by stacks of manila folders and half-drunk mugs of tea. "What's your endgame, Delia?" she asked, her voice low. "You could ruin him. Them. Everyone." I stared at the numbers on the spreadsheet until they blurred. "I don't want ruin for the sake of it. I want the company to survive. I want the people who actually make it run to have jobs in 6 months." She raised an eyebrow. "And your brother?" I felt my jaw tighten. "I want him to know he can't break me again." Julianne reached over and squeezed my hand. "Then let's make it happen." The next morning, I drove back to the old corporate headquarters, a red brick building with a brass plaque out front that read, "Harper and Son, established 1964. The irony always burned. Never Harper and Daughter. Never. The receptionist blinked when I walked in, like she'd seen a ghost. "Miss Harper," she stammered. "Your brother didn't mention." "I'm not here for him," I said, breezing past. "Is Gary in today?" Gary Jameson, the plant manager for 30 years. The only one who'd ever told me the truth when I was too young to understand it. He was in his cramped office, surrounded by filing cabinets and the smell of oil and metal. He looked up, eyes crinkling. "Well, I'll be damned. Cordelia Harper in my doorway." "Got a minute?" I asked. "For you?" always. We talked for hours. About the real books, the unspoken debts, the good people who'd stuck around through missed paychecks and broken promises because they believed the Harpers would come through eventually. He didn't sugarcoat it, he didn't need to, and by the end, I knew what I had to do. Back in my car, I stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror. For the first time in years, I saw myself not as the girl they left behind, but as the woman who would outlast them. I drove straight to the lawyer's office. Julianne was already there, waiting with a stack of fresh paperwork. "Ready?" she asked. "Ready," I said. It's time they learned what real power looks like. I signed my name so many times that my hand cramped. When it was done, Julianne leaned back in her chair, grinning. "You know this means war, right?" I smiled back, something cold and bright flickering in my chest. "Good. I'm done playing nice." When I stepped outside, the wind was biting again, sharp and clean. I pulled my coat tighter and whispered to myself, "Let them come." Because this time, I wasn't the one who should be afraid. The morning after the contracts were filed, the Cold War in my family became a full-on siege. I woke to my phone vibrating itself halfway off my nightstand. 10 missed calls, 5 new voicemails. One from Alistair, short, venomous, slurred enough to let me know he'd started drinking before sunrise. 2 from Mother, sickly sweet, asking me to reconsider, to come for tea like we used to. We never used to. The other 2? Lawyers, real ones this time. Ones who could pronounce subpoena without stumbling over the syllables. I made my coffee extra strong. I would need it. Julianne arrived before I'd finished my first cup, coat flapping around her like a cape, eyes bright with something that looked suspiciously like the thrill of battle. "They're going to come after you every way they can," she said, dropping a stack of fresh papers onto my kitchen table. "I'm moving your accounts offshore, setting up protections, but you need to be ready. They'll get personal." I sipped my coffee, black and bitter. "Let them. I'm serious, Delia." She leaned forward. "Your brother is cornered. Men like him don't back down. They burn things to the ground so no one else can have them." I thought of Alistair's smirk, the way his hands twitched when I told him the truth. I thought of Father's hollow eyes, Mother's brittle smile. I thought of the girl I used to be. Quiet, polite, grateful for scraps. "Good," I said. "Let him try." That afternoon, I made my first public move. I drove to the factory again, this time with Julianne and a notary in tow. The place buzzed with uneasy energy. Whispers spread like wildfire. Gary met me at the door. "You sure about this?" he asked, his hand resting on my shoulder. "I am," I said. "It's time they knew who really signs their checks." We held the meeting in the cavernous break room, folding chairs scraped across concrete. Line workers, office staff, even a few old-timers who'd retired but still drifted in for gossip gathered around. Alistair was nowhere to be seen. Of course, he never did face the help when there was bad news to deliver. I stood on a metal chair and cleared my throat. "Some of you know me. Some of you don't. My name is Cordelia Harper, and I'm here because you deserve the truth." They watched me, wide-eyed, wary. A few crossed their arms. I didn't blame them. For years you've been told the company is fine, that late paychecks are normal, that we're just weathering a storm. It's a lie. The truth is, the business has been mismanaged into the ground. Suppliers haven't been paid. Orders are getting lost, and you're the ones left holding the bag. A low murmur rippled through the crowd. "Here's what's going to change," I said. "I own this company now. Not legally, yet, not fully, but the leverage is mine. And with that, I promise you this. No more bounce checks. No more late wages. No more lies." Someone in the back called out, "What about Alistair?" I felt my jaw clench. My brother will stay on, under me, for now. But his days of skimming off your labor are over. If he tries, I'll have him out so fast he won't have time to pack up his whiskey decanter. A few people laughed. Short, sharp. The tension cracked just a little. "Why should we trust you?" another voice said. A woman I vaguely remembered from my summer job in shipping. "Janie? Jeannie?" Her hair was streaked gray now, but her eyes were fierce. "Because," I said, meeting her gaze, "I was you. The girl they pretended didn't matter. The one they left behind. They didn't see me coming, and they won't see you coming either. Together, we take back what's ours. For a second, the room was dead quiet. Then Gary stepped forward, big hands clapping together. "You heard the lady. Let's get to work." The meeting ended in a buzz of new hope and old anger. I stayed behind, signing papers, shaking hands, making promises I intended to keep. When I finally stepped back into the crisp evening air, I felt something inside me settle. The staff believed in me. Not all, but enough, and that was more than I'd ever had before. The drive home was a blur. My phone kept pinging. Messages from reporters sniffing around, ex-colleagues who suddenly wanted to grab coffee, distant cousins reminding me they always believed in you. I ignored them all. Back at my flat, Julianne was waiting. "They filed an injunction," she said without preamble. "They're claiming you obtained the mortgage under duress. Fraud. They'll try to tie you up in court for months." "Do they have a case?" she snorted. "Not a real one, but Alistair's counting on you folding. He's going to be disappointed," I said. Then I laughed. Really laughed. For the first time in weeks. Julianne watched me with a half smile. "You're dangerous when you're like this, you know?" "Good," I said again. He should be afraid. But late that night, when the laughter died, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The fight was only beginning. And somewhere deep down, I knew my family would come at me in ways I couldn't yet imagine. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about legacy, pride, and the twisted roots that bound us all together. And tomorrow, I'd pull those roots up one by one, until the whole rotten orchard came crashing down. Morning slid in like a dull blade, cutting through my thin curtains and casting a gray glow over the stacks of documents Julianne and I had left scattered across my living room floor. I hadn't slept more than a few hours. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Alistair's grin. Sharp, wolfish, promising ruin. And in my dreams, the house always crumbled stone by stone, until only my name was left scrawled in ash. I shoved the thoughts aside and made my way to the kitchen. The coffee maker sputtered, wheezing out its brew while my phone buzzed with fresh notifications. More lawyers. More rumors. One blog even suggested I'd blackmailed my parents at gunpoint. I snorted at that. My parents were their own hostage takers. They just never expected their silent daughter to flip the switch on the locks. Julianne arrived right after sunrise, still in yesterday's clothes. She looked like hell, but then again so did I. She threw her bag on the counter and went straight for my fridge. "Is this all you have?" she asked, holding up a jar of mustard and a half-empty wine bottle. "Breakfast of champions," I said, pouring her a cup of the burnt coffee. "What's the latest?" She perched on a stool, sipping the sludge with a grimace. "They're pushing the fraud angle hard. Alistair's trying to paint you as an unhinged ex-employee who forged signatures. He's got Franklin working every loophole." I rolled my eyes. Franklin couldn't forge a birthday card. Julianne didn't smile. "It doesn't have to be true, Delia. Just messy enough to make you look unstable." I sat down opposite her, my fingers drumming on the countertop. "Then we get ahead of it. We show them the real records. The offshore siphoning. The ghost accounts. We make sure the people who matter see who's really unstable." She nodded, but her eyes were wary. "This gets dirtier from here. They'll come for you, and for anyone who stands with you." I thought of Gary, of Jeannie in shipping, of the tired workers who'd trusted me when they had no reason to. Then they'll find out just how stubborn I can be. I spent the next 2 days knee-deep in files, my mind a battlefield of receipts and hidden debts. The more I found, the more I realized my brother hadn't just bled the company dry. He'd done it with a smile and a pat on the back, convinced no one would ever lift the curtain. But I was lifting it now, and the rot behind it stank. It was late on the 3rd day when Gary called. I almost didn't answer. I was elbow-deep in spreadsheets, and my eyes felt like they'd been sanded down to the nerves. But something in his voicemail made me pause. "Cordelia, it's Gary. You need to come down here, now." When I arrived at the factory gates, the first thing I saw was the police cruiser parked out front. Its lights were off, but the two officers inside were watching the building like it might sprout legs and run away. I pushed past them, ignoring their half-hearted protests. Gary was waiting in the break room, his big hands wringing a stained ball cap. He looked 10 years older than he had last week. "What happened?" I asked. He hesitated. "It's Alistair. He showed up drunk, started yelling at the floor managers. Tried to fire half the line workers on the spot. When they wouldn't leave, he punched one of the new kids." My stomach lurched. "Is the kid okay?" Yeah, just a busted lip. But it's all over the floor now. Everyone's scared, Delia." I sank into one of the metal chairs. "Did the cops take him?" Gary shook his head. "He was gone by the time they showed up. But he'll be back. You know he will." I did. I could feel it in my bones. Alistair wasn't just lashing out, he was unraveling. And an unraveling man was a dangerous one. "Okay," I said, my voice steady. "First thing tomorrow, we put new security on the doors. No one gets in without my say-so. We protect the workers." Gary looked at me, his eyes tired but grateful. "And you? Who's protecting you?" I forced a smile. "I'm not the one who needs protecting." But that night, alone in my flat, I double-checked every lock. I slept with my phone on the pillow beside me, Julianne's number on speed dial. And when sleep came, it was thin and restless. The next morning brought no reprieve. My parents summoned me to the house. My house, but you wouldn't know it from the tone of Mother's message. "Come home, Cordelia," she'd said, her voice dripping with the kind of brittle sweetness that made my skin crawl. "We need to talk." I almost didn't go, but then I thought of Alistair, spinning his web of lies. I thought of my father's trembling hands, my mother's sideways glances. I wanted to see how far they'd go to protect the son who was dragging us all down. So I went. They were waiting for me in the dining room, like royalty holding court. The same walnut table, polished to a mirror shine. The same heavy curtains drawn tight against the afternoon sun. Alistair's seat was empty, but his shadow stretched across the room anyway. Mother was first to speak. "Cordelia, we've been speaking with Franklin. There are options." I let out a dry laugh. "Options? Like pretending you didn't sign those loan agreements?" Father winced. "Don't speak to your mother like that." I leaned forward, bracing my palms on the table. "I'll speak how I damn well please. You gave him everything, and when he wasted it, you came crawling back for more. Now you want me to pretend it didn't happen?" Mother's eyes flashed. "He's your brother." "He's a leech," I snapped, "and you're the ones who let him feed." Father slammed his hand down. "You will not speak about family that way. Then maybe you should have treated me like family." I fired back. "You think I wanted this? You think I enjoy watching you squirm? I wanted to build something with you. But you locked me out and handed him the keys." Mother's face crumpled, the mask slipping for just a second. "We thought we were protecting you." "No," I said, my voice suddenly quiet. "You were protecting him. And now look where it's gotten you." Silence fell, thick as syrup. In that silence, I felt something shift. Not forgiveness, never that. But clarity. They'd never understand me. They'd never be the parents I needed. And that was okay. I stood up. "I'm not here to ask for permission anymore. If Alistair shows his face at the factory again, I'll have him arrested. If you try to block me in court, I'll drag every dirty secret you have into the light." Mother's lip trembled. "Cordelia, please. Save it," I said. "You made your choice years ago. Now I'm making mine." I turned and walked out, the weight lifting off my shoulders with every step. Outside, the wind was cold and clean, the sky the color of steel. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A message from Julianne. It read, "It's happening. They're filing today. Ready? Asterisk." I smiled, teeth bared like a blade. More than ready. This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe. Now back to the story. I sat in my car outside the courthouse for 10 minutes before I could make my hands stop shaking. The air was thick, with the buzz of reporters, lawyers, and rubberneckers all hoping to catch a glimpse of the Harper family's dirty laundry flapping in the wind. It was almost poetic. We'd built our lives behind brick walls and shuttered windows, pretending our rot smelled like roses. Now the scent of it was thick enough for the whole damn town to gag on. Julianne climbed into the passenger seat, folders in hand. She'd been up all night prepping the countersuit. She looked like hell, but her eyes were bright. "You ready?" she asked. I laughed, though it sounded more like a choke. "Do I look ready?" She squeezed my hand. "You look like Cordelia Harper. That's enough." The courtroom was packed. Alistair sat at the plaintiff's table, flanked by two lawyers I recognized, from one of the old country club galas Mother used to drag me, to when she wanted to pretend we were a happy family. He was dressed to the nines, as usual, but the shine couldn't hide the dark circles under his eyes, or the twitch at the corner of his mouth. He didn't look at me when I walked in. That was fine. I didn't need his eyes to see him. I'd memorized his moves years ago. Julianne leaned in. "He's going to push every button he can. Don't bite. No promises," I said. When the judge finally called the session to order, Alistair's lead attorney launched into a speech so dripping with condescension, I thought the jury might drown in it. He painted me as a manipulative daughter who'd trapped her aging parents with predatory lending schemes. He even managed to slip the word hysterical in twice, which made Julianne's pen nearly snap in her hand. My turn came, and I stood. My legs felt like they were made of glass, but my voice held steady. "Your Honor," I said, "everything you've heard is half a story told by a man who's been lying so long he can't tell the truth from his own reflection. The records speak for themselves. I didn't steal this company. I saved it, because if I hadn't, every person who works for us would have been out on the street months ago." I looked straight at Alistair when I said that. He flinched. Good. By the end of the day, the hearing adjourned with no decision. The judge wanted time to review the evidence. Alistair stormed out without a glance at me, but I saw Mother in the back row, wringing her gloved hands like they might strangle her next. Father didn't show. I wondered if he was too sick, or just too ashamed. Julianne and I walked to the car in silence. When we climbed in, she let out a low whistle. "You did it. You didn't even cuss him out." "Don't tempt me," I muttered. "It's not over yet." She tilted her head, studying me. "You ever think about what you'll do when it is over?" "Sleep," I said without missing a beat. "Sleep for a week straight." She laughed. "And after that?" The question lingered. I didn't have an answer. ... The next few days blurred. Court filings, emergency meetings with the workers, long nights with Julianne cross-referencing every shady wire transfer we could find. Each piece of evidence felt like a small match thrown onto a pile of dry brush. I knew it would go up in flames eventually. I just didn't know when. One night, close to dawn, my phone buzzed with a message from a number I didn't recognize. Asterisk. "Meet me at the old place. Need to talk." Just that. No name. But I knew who it was. There was only one person who would call the house asterisk, the old place. I found Alistair on the back patio, slumped in one of Father's ancient lawn chairs. The gardens that once won Mother's precious awards were overgrown now, brambles reclaiming the roses like a kingdom that knew how to bite. He didn't look up when I stepped onto the stone path. His glass was empty. His eyes were glassier. "You're trespassing," I said, folding my arms. He barked out a laugh. "Can't trespass in your own home." "It's not yours anymore," I reminded him. "You signed it away when you bled the business dry." He flinched. "Good. How long you been planning this?" he asked. His voice was raw. "Since you left?" "Since you made me leave," I shot back. He dragged a hand through his hair. "You think you're better than me?" "No," I said softly. "I know I am." He laughed again. This one broke halfway through. "Mother and Father, they won't survive this." "They chose this," I said. "You did too." "You always think you're so right," he muttered, staring out at the garden. "So pure." I stepped closer, but not too close. "No, I'm just done pretending I'm the broken one." His shoulders sagged. For a moment, he looked like the brother I used to chase through these gardens. The boy who once helped me climb the apple tree out back, who covered my scrapes with band-aids and a crooked smile. But then he spoke again. "You win, Cordelia," he whispered. "You win." I turned to leave before the wind could scatter those words and make me doubt them. ... The injunction failed. The court sided with me. The staff voted, overwhelmingly, to back my plan. The investors I'd been courting for months stepped forward, impressed by the sheer grit of it all. Piece by piece, the company began to shift. Not fixed yet, but shifting. Healing. The day we signed the final transfer paperwork, Gary brought me a single white rose from the wild garden behind the factory. "Been a long time coming," he said, pressing the stem into my palm. I thought of Mother's prize roses, cut down by my brother's fists, my father's silence, and my own determination to be more than their scapegoat. I let that rose sit on my desk while I drafted new policies, wage protections, safe reporting, bonuses for the people who'd stuck by me. When the last form was signed, I stood at the front gate, looking out at the road that led me away so many years ago. Now it brought me back. Not as a beggar, not as a backup plan, but as the owner, the survivor. I knew Alistair wouldn't disappear quietly. People like him never do. But I wasn't afraid anymore. He'd taught me too well how to fight. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A message from Julianne. "You did it." Asterisk. I smiled, the rose cradled in my hand like a promise. And somewhere, deep in the marrow of this place, I felt the roots shifting, ready for something new to bloom. I woke on the first morning after the court's ruling to an empty house. My empty house. The silence was a different kind of roar, one that pulsed in my ears with every reminder that there was no one left to second-guess me. No one left to tug the rug out from under my feet. The staff at the factory had my back. Julianne was already on her third pot of coffee drafting the final clauses, and the papers that had once made me feel small now carried my name in bold black ink. Still, sleep clung to my skin like a second layer of sweat, sticky with the residue of old nightmares. In the half-light before dawn, I thought I heard footsteps on the landing, the echo of Alistair's drunken threats, my mother's polite knock. "Cordelia, we need to talk." But there was no one there, just me and the hollow sound of my own breath. Downstairs, the windows rattled in their frames. A storm was rolling in, an old, rattling Atlantic gale that smelled like brine and fresh earth. I cracked a window and let it sweep through the halls like a baptism. It didn't feel like an ending. It felt like the start of a story I'd been writing in the dark for years, scribbled between rejection letters and late-night train rides and whispered arguments in the shadows of family portraits. I made tea, black and scalding, and stood by the front door watching the rain pick up. In the garden, the brambles that had once strangled Mother's roses looked like they were trying to stand up straight. I liked them better that way. Wild, unruled, stubbornly alive. A knock jolted me. For a heartbeat, I braced for Alistair's frame to fill the glass, eyes bloodshot, mouth twisted. But it was Gary, hat dripping and coat too thin for the storm. "You're up early," he said as I opened the door. "I don't sleep much these days," I said, stepping back to let him in. He stomped the mud off his boots and looked around like he'd stepped into a museum. "Never thought I'd see this place again. Well, it's mine now. If I want to tear down the wallpaper and paint every wall black, no one can stop me." He chuckled, the sound soft. "Could use some life, that's for sure." I poured him tea and we sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Mother used to sip her coffee, and remind me that being nice was more important than being right. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. "They're saying Alistair skipped town," Gary said after a long silence. I stirred my tea. "He'll pop up when he thinks I'm not looking." "You scared?" I paused, searching for the truth in my gut. "No, just tired." He nodded. "You did what you had to do. Most people wouldn't have had the guts." "Is that what they're saying down at the plant?" "That, and that the new boss doesn't take any crap. And that payday came on time this week for the first time in months. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. It's not enough yet? No, he agreed, but it's a start. We sat in companionable silence, the wind rattling the old windows. For the first time in my life, the creaks and groans of the house didn't scare me. They sounded like the place was stretching, learning how to breathe again. When Gary left, I pulled on my boots and a heavy coat and walked the perimeter of the grounds. I needed to see the land that had been both prison and fortress for my family for so long. The rose beds were a tangle of thorn and dead wood. I knelt, fingertips grazing the roots, damp earth pressing into my skin. "You can stay," I whispered to the wild brambles. "But you grow on my terms now." The wind carried my words away, but I felt them settle in the soil. Back inside, I found Julianne asleep at the dining table, surrounded by drafts and legal pads scrawled with deadlines, budgets, and new investor lists. She startled awake when I touched her shoulder. "God, I need to get you a real office," I teased. She snorted. "Your dining room table is my office." I handed her a mug of fresh coffee. "How bad is it?" She yawned, flipping through the top page. "Better than it was. But you've got a mountain of back debts. Some creditors will settle. Some will try to bleed you dry." "Let them try," I said. She looked at me, really looked. "Delia, when do you let yourself rest? When the house is paid off? When the company's solvent? When the people who stuck by me don't have to worry about next month?" She smiled, but her eyes were sad. "So never." I didn't answer. The truth was there between us. Unspoken, ... In the weeks that followed, I became both queen and executioner. I signed termination papers for the crooked middle managers Alistair had planted like weeds. I rewrote contracts with suppliers who'd been overcharging us for decades. I walked the factory floor every day, shaking hands, asking names, learning stories. One night, I found Jeannie from shipping in the break room, staring at her pay stub like it was a magic ticket. "Jeannie," I said, gently, "everything okay?" She looked up, eyes rimmed red. "You made good on your promise." "It's just a paycheck," I said, but she shook her head. "It's more than that, it's hope." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Well, don't spread that around. I've got a reputation to maintain." She laughed. A small, brittle thing that felt like the first crack in a frozen river. ... Late one night, the call came. A private number. My pulse leapt like a startled bird. "Cordelia." Alistair's voice slurred into the line. "Little D, did you really think you'd won?" I let the silence answer for me. "You can't run this forever," he snarled. "You'll screw it up. You'll crawl back. And when you do—" "I won't," I said calmly. "Good night, Alistair." I hung up before he could spew more poison. Julianne found me on the porch afterward, arms wrapped tight around myself against the chill. She didn't say anything, just sat beside me and handed me a blanket. "He's not gone," I whispered. "No," she agreed, "but you're still here, and he hates that more than anything." I closed my eyes, the wind tugging at my hair, the brambles rattling in the dark. The house felt alive around me, shifting its bones, learning how to stand without the ghosts that had ruled it for so long. Tomorrow, I'd fight again, for the business, for the people counting on me, for the roots I'd chosen to keep, and for the first time, I believed I'd win. "You can stay," I whispered to the wild brambles, "but you grow on my terms now." The wind carried my words away, but I felt them settle in the soil. Back inside, I found Julianne asleep at the dining table, surrounded by drafts and legal pads scrawled with deadlines, budgets, and new investor lists. She startled awake when I touched her shoulder. "God, I need to get you a real office," I teased. She snorted. "Your dining room table is my office." I handed her a mug of fresh coffee. "How bad is it?" She yawned, flipping through the top page. "Better than it was. But you've got a mountain of back debts. Some creditors will settle. Some will try to bleed you dry." "Let them try," I said. She looked at me, really looked. Delia, when do you let yourself rest? When the house is paid off? When the company's solvent? When the people who stuck by me don't have to worry about next month? She smiled, but her eyes were sad. So never. I didn't answer. The truth was there between us. Unspoken, ... In the weeks that followed, I became both queen and executioner. I signed termination papers for the crooked middle managers Alistair had planted like weeds. I rewrote contracts with suppliers who'd been overcharging us for decades. I walked the factory floor every day, shaking hands, asking names, learning stories. One night, I found Jeannie from shipping in the break room, staring at her pay stub like it was a magic ticket. "Jeannie," I said, gently, "everything okay?" She looked up, eyes rimmed red. "You made good on your promise." "It's just a paycheck," I said, but she shook her head. "It's more than that, it's hope." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Well, don't spread that around. I've got a reputation to maintain." She laughed. A small, brittle thing that felt like the first crack in a frozen river. ... Late one night, the call came. A private number. My pulse leapt like a startled bird. "Cordelia." Alistair's voice slurred into the line. "Little D, did you really think you'd won?" I let the silence answer for me. "You can't run this forever," he snarled. "You'll screw it up. You'll crawl back. And when you do—" "I won't," I said calmly. "Good night, Alistair." I hung up before he could spew more poison. Julianne found me on the porch afterward, arms wrapped tight around myself against the chill. She didn't say anything, just sat beside me and handed me a blanket. "He's not gone," I whispered. "No," she agreed, "but you're still here, and he hates that more than anything." I closed my eyes, the wind tugging at my hair, the brambles rattling in the dark. The house felt alive around me, shifting its bones, learning how to stand without the ghosts that had ruled it for so long. Tomorrow, I'd fight again, for the business, for the people counting on me, for the roots I'd chosen to keep, and for the first time, I believed I'd win. By the time the leaves turned brittle and gold, the factory's old neon sign was flickering back to life, one letter at a time, like the bones of something that refused to stay buried. It was almost poetic, watching the name Harper and Son burn back into the night sky when the son had vanished and the daughter had dug her hands into the rot and dared it to bloom. Each morning I woke before dawn to the smell of new paint and cut metal, the echo of machines starting up like a heartbeat. The crew worked longer hours than they had in years, some because they needed the pay, but most because they finally believed it wouldn't bounce. Julianne and I lived out of the factory offices for weeks. The upstairs suite that once belonged to Father turned into a command center of coffee mugs, tacked-up flowcharts and budget drafts, so marked up they looked like crime scenes. The place still smelled faintly of his cologne, expensive, cold, the scent of a man who spent more time in golf course clubhouses than on a factory floor. Some nights I'd catch myself lingering at his old desk, fingers tracing the gouges in the oak, remembering how many times he'd told me, "Not now, Cordelia," when I'd asked if I could help. Now, I didn't need permission. I was the one signing the checks, ... Gary knocked on the open door one afternoon, holding a box that rattled with old keys. "You should have these," he said. "The master set. Didn't seem right to leave them on the old peg." I took the box from him, the weight of 100 tiny locks pressing down on my palms. "What did you do with Alistair's set?" Gary's mouth twitched into a half-smile. "Melted it down. Figured it could be more useful as scrap." I laughed, a short, surprised bark that startled the tension from my shoulders. "Good." He lingered in the doorway, looking like he wanted to say more. "You're doing good work here, Dee." "It's not done yet," I said automatically. "It never will be," he said. "That's the thing no one tells you about owning something. It owns you back." ... The next weeks blurred into one another. Meetings with union reps, local banks sniffing around with small business loans now that the debt monsters had been dragged into the light, and endless hours digging through supply chain contracts. Some nights I'd wake with the sting of paper cuts on my fingertips, the numbers etched into my dreams. Julianne would push coffee into my hands, her own hair twisted into a permanent messy knot. "You need a break," she'd say. "I'll take one when we make payroll next month without touching the line of credit," I'd reply. She'd roll her eyes but never argue. Once, when the stress got too tight around my ribs, I drove out to the old house. The lawn was half wild now, the garden brambles grown so thick they almost looked intentional, like a fortress. I walked the halls alone, the echoes of my footsteps following me up the staircase to my old bedroom. The wallpaper was peeling at the corners. I found a box in the closet, my box, taped shut since the day I'd left. Inside were old diaries, a broken charm bracelet, a photo of me and Alistair under the apple tree, his arms slung around my shoulders like we hadn't yet learned how to hurt each other. I didn't stay long. The house felt more like a mausoleum than a memory now. I locked the front door behind me, the key warm in my palm, and left the ghosts to rot in the rose beds. Then, just when the dust seemed ready to settle, the letter came. It arrived on plain stationery, no return address, slipped under the factory office door like a snake shedding its skin in the night. Julianne found it first. She hovered in my doorway, her face unreadable, the envelope held like it might bite. "You need to see this," she said. I opened it with hands steadier than I felt. The words were few, the ink familiar. Alistair's handwriting. Asterisk. "You think you've won. You never understood that some debts can't be bought out. Watch your back. Asterisk." I let out a slow breath. Julianne sat across from me, fingers drumming the desk. "What do you want to do?" I folded the letter once, then again, until the words disappeared into a tight square of paper. "Nothing," I said. "Let him talk." "Delia." "No." I cut her off. "If he wanted to do more than rattle my bones, he'd be here. He's bluffing." But that night, the shadows in the corners of my office felt thicker. Every echo in the empty factory halls made my shoulders tense. I checked the locks twice, 3 times. I let the security guard walk me to my car, even though I told him not to bother. I didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of my bed and watched the storm roll in through the tall windows, lightning throwing the trees into sharp relief against the dark. Some debts can't be bought out. It wasn't about money anymore. It never really had been. It was about control. About who got to write the ending to a story that had started long before either of us knew how to hold a pen. The next morning, I called an emergency staff meeting. The break room was packed. Gary in the front row, Jeannie from shipping leaning on a mop handle, the line workers and bookkeepers all squeezed in tight. "I won't keep you long," I said, my voice echoing off the cinderblock walls. "You've probably heard the rumors. You've probably heard that my brother is sniffing around, trying to scare us." A low murmur rippled through the crowd. "Let him," I said. "He had his chance to build something here. He burned it down instead. But we?" I swept my hand to the room. "We're still here. We made payroll. We kept the lights on. We did that together." Jeannie raised her hand. "What happens if he comes back?" I smiled, teeth sharp as the truth. "Then he can stand outside the gate and watch us work." They laughed. A brittle, brave sound that made the walls feel less like a prison and more like a fortress. I felt something settle in my chest then, a promise. A pulse that said, "This is yours now. All of it. The debt, the weight, the hope." When the meeting broke up, Gary clapped me on the shoulder. "You're one of us now," he said. "Not just the boss." I squeezed his hand. "I always was. They just didn't want to see it." Later that night, Julianne found me in the parking lot, staring up at the flickering neon sign. "What if he tries something?" she asked. "Then we handle it," I said. "Like we always do." She smiled, tired but sure. "I'd follow you anywhere, you know." I turned to her, the storm wind tugging at our hair, the bramble roses scratching at the factory fence line like they wanted in. "Then let's make sure there's somewhere worth following me to." And I knew, as the first fat drops of rain hit the cracked pavement, that I'd fight as long as it took until every root he'd poisoned was cut out. Until the Harper name meant something better than just another debt no one wanted to pay. The storm didn't break for 3 days. It hammered the factory roof like a relentless drum. the kind that gets into your bones and makes you wonder if the walls you've built are strong enough to hold. I stayed on site the whole time, sleeping on a battered cot Julianne dragged into the corner of my office. Gary checked the doors twice every night, flashlight sweeping over the parking lot where the neon sign flickered through sheets of rain. Every knock on the door made my pulse hitch. Every ring of my phone made my stomach knot. But Alistair never came. Not in the flesh, anyway. Instead, he slipped through the cracks in rumors and whispers. Anonymous tips to the press about my questionable business tactics, letters slipped under the break room door, warning the staff that I'd run them all into the ground, just like I ran our family apart. Each note was signed the same way. Mizacle. He wants you to break, Julianne said one night, her voice hoarse from too many emergency board calls. He wants you to lose your mind so you'll make a mistake. I traced my thumb over the fresh bruise on my palm from where I'd punched my desk in a moment of frustration. I'm not breaking. She looked at me, eyes tired but sharp. Cordelia, you're allowed to be scared. I'm not scared, I said. And maybe that was true. Maybe I was something worse. Tired, brittle, but unwilling to bend because I knew if I did, he'd snap me in half. ... On the fourth day, the storm finally gave way to a pale, exhausted dawn. The factory yard was littered with branches and puddles that looked like small lakes, but the neon sign still burned. Harper and Son. A cruel joke, but one I let stand for now. I stood out there with Gary, our boots sinking into the mud as we surveyed the damage. Could have been worse, he said, scratching his stubbled chin. Always could, I said. We'll patch it. He nodded, his eyes flicking to the fence line where the bramble roses tangled with the wire. You know, those things will take over if you don't keep cutting them back. I know, I said. But they keep the wrong people out. ... Inside, Julianne was already at her laptop, glasses perched low on her nose. Good news or bad news first? She asked as I walked in. Bad. Alistair filed an appeal on the injunction. He's trying to drag you back to court. Says you violated some handshake agreement with the family when you took over the mortgage. I snorted. A handshake agreement? He's really reaching. It'll tie you up for months if it sticks. And the good news? She tapped her screen. The new investors are still in. In fact, they want to increase their share. They believe you can weather this. I leaned against the wall, letting that sink in. It shouldn't have felt like hope, but it did. Good. Let him sue me into the ground. I'll still be here. Julianne's eyes flicked up to mine. Do you ever think about walking away, selling the house, the company, just being done? Sometimes, I said honestly, but every time I do, I see his face. I hear Mother telling me to be quiet, to wait my turn. I can't walk away from that. I can't let it stand. She closed her laptop with a soft click. Then we fight, I echoed. I didn't leave the factory for a week. I showered in the old locker room, shared stale bagels with the night shift, let the hum of the machines drown out the hiss of doubt that sometimes crept in when the dark got too quiet. One night, Jeannie found me in the loading bay, staring at the fresh stacks of outgoing shipments. You should get some sleep, she said, handing me a paper cup of burnt coffee. Soon, I lied. She studied me for a long moment, her face creased with years of worry that had nothing to do with me but somehow made me feel responsible anyway. Don't let him take any more from you, Dee. I forced a smile. He won't. But in the dark hours before dawn, I dreamed of him. Alistair standing in the garden behind the old house, roses at his feet, thorns climbing his legs like chains. He looked at me with that grin that always came right before he struck. And when I woke, my throat was raw from words I hadn't said aloud in years. Why wasn't I ever enough? ... When the court date came, Julianne and I walked through the double doors together like we were stepping into a den of wolves. Alistair was there, of course, hair slicked back, suit perfectly pressed, the same cologne I'd smelled on Father for years. He didn't look at me. Not at first. His lawyer droned on about breach of trust and familial obligation, about how I'd tricked my parents into signing over their home. It was all noise. None of it stuck. When the judge asked if I had anything to say, I stood. "This company was dying when I stepped in," I said, my voice echoing off the marble walls. My brother was too drunk on power and whiskey to see it. My parents were too proud to admit it. I didn't trick anyone, I gave them a lifeline. They chose to wrap it around my neck instead. Alistair flinched at that. Good. Let him feel the rope for once. The judge didn't rule that day. Of course not. That would be too easy. But as we left, I caught Alistair's eyes for the first time. For a heartbeat, I saw something raw there, something that looked like fear. I held it, memorized it. Outside, the press waited, hungry as vultures. I held up a hand, my voice steady. "No comment. We'll let the facts speak." Julianne grinned as we ducked into the car. "You killed it in there." "He'll keep coming," I said, watching the courthouse recede in the rearview mirror. "Then so will we," she shot back. ... Back at the factory, Gary waited by the old gates. He handed me a small box wrapped in brown paper. "What's this?" I asked. "Something from your father's desk," he said. "Figured you should have it." Inside was a tarnished, silver pen, the kind you'd give a man on his retirement day. I remembered it well. Father used to sign everything with it. Mortgages, loan agreements, letters telling me, "No, looks like it's yours now," Gary said softly. I turned the pen over in my hand. It felt heavier than it should have. "No," I said. "It was always mine." He clapped my shoulder. "Damn right, ... That night, I stood alone in my office, the silver pen on the desk in front of me. The neon sign buzzed outside the window. Harper and Son. I thought of changing it. Harper and Daughter, or just Harper Jasper Nuxie this the point. But maybe that was the point. The name didn't matter. The work did. The people did. I locked the office door, sat at Father's old desk, and picked up the pen. One signature at a time, I'd write us all free. One page at a time, I'd rebuild the thing they tried to bury me under. And if Alistair ever came back, if he ever stepped foot inside these gates again, he'd find the bramble roses grown tall and wild, the roots too deep to pull. He'd find me. And he'd know. The debt was paid. In full. The factory breathed in the dark. That's how it felt to me. Like it had a pulse now. Like the old bricks and creaking beams were lungs pulling in air for the first time in decades. Sometimes, late at night, I'd walk the production floor just to hear it. Machines humming, conveyor belts rattling, people laughing in the break room, even on the graveyard shift. It wasn't perfect, but it was alive. After the last court date, Alistair's shadow receded but never vanished. The papers stopped arriving under doors, but rumors lingered like oil on water. He'd turned the country club crowd against me. People who'd known me as Cordelia, the quiet one. The girl they all pitied when they thought of my mother's clipped remarks or my father's dismissive nods. Now they called me ruthless, ungrateful. A daughter who stole from her own blood. Let them talk. Their whispers didn't pay my workers or fix the roof. Julianne and I worked side by side every day, our desks pushed together in the corner office. She handled the new loan negotiations while I dug into the vendor contracts, rewriting years of bad faith into something that could actually last. Every so often, she'd look up at me with that mix of worry and admiration I was never sure how to handle. "You're burning yourself out," she'd say. "Even steel bends." "Then I'll bend," I'd reply. "But not yet, ... One Thursday, I held a meeting with the floor supervisors, Gary at my side like a quiet anchor. We talked numbers, new shifts, even the possibility of bonuses if we cleared the debt by the end of the quarter. I watched their faces, people who'd given decades to this place, who'd held on long after Alistair had turned the lights off and walked away. They didn't clap or cheer when I promised them the books would stay open, the paychecks would stay honest. They just nodded. They believed me. That was worth more than applause. Afterward, Gary lingered by the old vending machine, tapping the glass like the ancient thing might cough up a miracle. "You good, Dee?" he asked, glancing at me sideways. Better than I was. Better ain't the same as good, he said. When's the last time you went home? This is home, I said, before I could stop myself. He smiled, a sad, knowing twist of his mouth. Maybe so, just don't forget to live in it. ... That night, I drove to the old house. The front gate squealed like it always did. The bramble roses had crept higher along the fence line, thorns pressing through the iron bars like they wanted out. I stepped out of my car and let the wind slap my face, the cold biting enough to remind me that I was real, and so was this place. Inside, the foyer was dark and smelled of dust. I didn't bother turning on the lights. I walked the halls by memory, past the portrait of Father with his cold eyes, Mother in her pearls, Alistair with that grin I used to trust. My face wasn't up there. It never had been. Not once. In the dining room, the walnut table was draped with a dusty sheet. I pulled it off, let the motes swirl through the air like ghosts. I remembered sitting here, begging for permission to stay, to help, to belong. I belong now, I whispered to the empty chairs. The floor creaked behind me. For a heartbeat, I braced for his voice. Alistair's hiss, promising I'd never be enough. But it was just the wind, rattling the windows like bones. I left the sheet in a heap on the floor and locked the door behind me. The next day brought good news and bad. The good: an old supplier offered us a better deal than we'd had in years. The bad: one of Alistair's cronies called an emergency shareholders meeting, claiming I was mismanaging assets and destabilizing the family brand. I read the notice twice, then crumpled it in my fist. They never quit, I told Julianne. No, she said, but neither do you. We walked into that meeting like we owned the place. Because we did. The old boardroom still smelled like cigar smoke and stale resentment. Alistair's proxy, a man named Benton, droned on for 15 minutes about responsible stewardship and legacy. When he finally paused for breath, I stood. Do you know how many people went unpaid under my brother's watch? I asked, my voice low but sharp. Do you know how many fake invoices he signed? How many late fees he racked up while he poured whiskey down his throat and told my parents it was all under control? No one answered. They all knew. If you want him back, say it now, I said. If you want to kill this company for good, say it now. But if you believe there's something worth saving, then let me do my job. No one moved. Benton sputtered, but his argument fell apart like wet paper. When they voted, the motion failed. By a landslide. Julianne squeezed my hand under the table. You did it, she whispered. No, I whispered back. We did. ... Weeks turned into months. We hit payroll on time. Every time. The first small bonus checks went out before Christmas, a few $100s each, but enough to make the break room buzz with cautious hope. Jeannie cornered me one afternoon with tears in her eyes, a card signed by the whole line crew. For sticking with us, it read. I kept it pinned above my desk like armor. Alistair's letters stopped coming. I heard he'd tried to rally some old family friends for one last shot at the company, but even they'd grown tired of his drinking and lies. The last rumor was that he'd skipped town again, some tropical island this time, burning through what little money he hadn't squandered. I didn't wish him well. I didn't wish him anything. In the new year, I sat with Gary and Julianne under the buzz of the old neon sign, Harper and Son, still flickering, but somehow more honest that way. We ever gonna change it? Gary asked, nodding at the sign. I shrugged. Maybe not. Julianne raised an eyebrow. What would you call it? I thought of the roses in the brambles, the roots I'd refused to dig out. Harper and Root, Gary laughed. Got a ring to it. But I didn't file the paperwork yet. Some things take time. Some names need to be earned. ... One night, as the last shift clocked out and the lights went low, I walked the production floor alone. I ran my fingers over the fresh paint, the new safety signs, the time clocks that didn't jam anymore. I listened for the heartbeat of the place. Steady, stubborn, alive. At the main gate, the brambles rustled in the wind. I bent down, pulled one thorned branch aside, and found a single bloom clinging to the stem. White, delicate, resilient. You stay, I whispered. You remind me. I didn't need Alistair's ghost anymore, or Mother's clipped approval, or Father's grudging nod. I had this place, these people, this fight. And if the debt was my inheritance, so was the freedom to pay it back, one day at a time. When I turned back to the factory, the sign buzzed overhead, flickering, imperfect, but still burning. So was I. Winter came down hard that year, laying a thin crust of ice over the factory roof and making the bramble roses glisten like barbed wire strung with diamonds. The old place never looked more alive than when it was fighting back. I liked that about it. I liked it because it felt like me, scarred, stubborn, still blooming. Gary kept the crew working short shifts when the weather turned dangerous, something Alistair would have called coddling, while he siphoned off their paychecks for another round at the country club bar. But now, the staff called it loyalty. They knew we were building something they could trust, brick by brick, paycheck by paycheck. Every morning before sunrise, I'd stand by the chain-link fence, boots crunching on frost, and watch the first trucks rumble out of the yard. Jeannie from shipping would always flash her headlights as she drove by, a silent promise that the wheels were still turning, even in the dead of winter. Inside, Julianne worked on a battered leather couch in my corner office, her legs tucked under her, legal pads balanced on her knees. You know, she said one morning, most CEOs would have a real office by now. A penthouse suite. A glass desk. This is my real office, I said, looking around at the drafty old room with its cracked windows and the bramble rose clipping I kept alive in a chipped coffee mug on my desk. Nothing grows in a glass box, she laughed. You should get that printed on a plaque. Maybe I will, ... But not everything was easy. Alistair's last appeal kept dragging through the courts like a stone tied to my ankle. He'd vanished to some overseas place no one could quite name, but his lawyers were still here, hired guns who didn't care if the factory survived so long as they got paid to keep me tangled in red tape. One night I sat at the conference table with Julianne, the windows rattling in the wind, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. We could settle, she said, careful like she always was when she thought I was frayed enough to snap. Give him a fraction. Make it go away. No, I said. Every dime he'd take is a dime out of their pockets. I nodded to the window, where Gary's silhouette passed by on his rounds. Out of Jeannie's, out of Gary's, she sighed. I knew you'd say that. Then why ask? Because I'm your lawyer, Delia. I'm supposed to remind you there are other ways to fight. Not for me, I said, closing the file. Not for this. She didn't argue after that. She just brewed another pot of coffee and sat with me until the sun came up. ... The call came on the coldest morning of the year. Gary was the one who answered the factory's main line, a relic from the 60s, all heavy plastic and tinny ringer. He came into my office, hat in hand, his face drawn tight. He's back, he said. I didn't have to ask who. ... I found Alistair in the old family house, sitting in the dining room like he owned it, like the last year hadn't happened, like the walls weren't cracked and the paint peeling. He looked thin, the expensive suit hanging off him like a borrowed skin. His eyes were glassy, but he was sober this time. Sober enough to spit every word like venom. You think you've won, he said when I didn't speak first. I leaned against the door frame, arms crossed. I don't have to think it. He laughed, but it broke halfway through. You can't keep it up. You'll burn out. They'll turn on you. They always do. You mean like you did? His hand twitched on the tablecloth. Mother's old linen, stained now, moth-eaten. You were never built for this, Cordelia. You were the quiet one. The nice one. You think that's a weakness? I stepped forward, the floorboards groaning under my boots. You made me this way. You taught me how to dig my claws in and never let go. He slammed his palm down, the sound sharp enough to echo. You owe me! I almost laughed. For what? For every lie you fed them while you drained them dry? For every door you slammed in my face? His lip curled. You think this is over? The board hates you. They'll drop you the second you stumble. Then I won't stumble, I said, simple as breathing. He stared at me, breathing hard, like he wanted to leap across the table and strangle the truth out of me. But he didn't. He just sank back into the chair, eyes rimmed red. "You think you're better than me." "No," I said, my voice soft but sharp enough to cut. "I know, I am, ... After that, the rumor mill roared back to life. Whispers that I'd pushed him out unfairly. That I was too young, too bitter, too broken to hold the reins. One afternoon, a newspaper ran an op-ed calling me the girl who killed the Harper legacy. Julianne tried to hide it from me, but I found it taped to my office door by some half-courageous fool who didn't sign their name. I tore it down. I didn't toss it away, though. I pinned it up behind my desk, next to the signed thank you card from the crew, next to the bonus checks I'd framed as a reminder that it wasn't just about me, ... March bled into April, the thaw revealing the factory grounds battered but alive. The bramble roses sprouted new shoots. Gary built a little bench out back near the loading docks where the crew would gather after shifts to smoke or swap gossip. I'd join them sometimes, sitting cross-legged on the splintered wood, boots muddy, hair pulled back, just another body in the cold dusk light. They didn't treat me like a boss then, they treated me like one of their own. It was better than any golden plaque or glass tower. One night Jeannie sat beside me on the bench, picking at the edge of her work gloves. "You ever wish you'd just let it go?" she asked. "Sold it off? Moved to the city?" I thought of the house, empty but still mine. Of Alistair, gnashing his teeth on the edges of my dreams. Of Mother's ghost, never quite saying sorry. "Sometimes," I said. "But then I remember, you all stuck around when you didn't have to. You deserve better." She smiled, crooked and tired but true. "So do you, Dee." I didn't have an answer for that. But the next morning, I drafted new policies, real severance packages, guaranteed overtime pay, scholarships for workers' kids. It wasn't enough to scrub out the sins of my father, my brother, the Harper name itself. But it was a start. ... At the next board meeting, Alistair showed up in person again. He wore the same suit, but the shine was gone. His lawyer tried to argue that I'd overstepped my authority when I rewrote the contracts. I let them drone on for 10 minutes before I stood. "You want the seat?" I asked him directly. "Take it. Take the debt. Take the payroll. Take the risk. Take the people who trust me now more than they ever trusted you." He said nothing. He couldn't. He knew the truth. The chair was mine, because no one else wanted to hold the weight. Not like I did. When the vote came, I stayed standing. His motion failed. Again. Outside, in the corridor, lined with framed photos of my father shaking hands with mayors and bankers, Alistair stopped me. "You'll never be one of them," he hissed. "You'll never be a Harper." I smiled, sharp and honest. "Good, ... That night, back at the factory, I found a single white rose tucked into the chain-link fence. No note. No name. Just the bloom, thorns intact, a reminder that some things root deep enough to survive anything. I left it there, its petals trembling in the wind. The fight wasn't over. It never would be. But neither was I. Spring came late, but when it did, it cracked the world wide open. The old factory yard, once nothing but cracked concrete and rusted fences, hummed with new life. Gary's makeshift bench out back now sat under a stretch of wild roses, white and red, thorny as ever. Some of the line crew had taken to calling them Cordelia's Bramble. I pretended to hate it, but the truth was, I let the nickname stick. Inside, things moved like they always did. Slow, stubborn, real. Orders came in, shipments went out. The new safety protocols held up. Nobody missed a paycheck. Some nights, I'd stand on the loading dock with Jeannie, sipping burnt coffee as the trucks rumbled off down the road, the neon sign buzzing overhead. Harper and SON. The last N still flickered when the wind hit it just right. It felt honest that way, unfinished, imperfect, alive. Julianne moved her whole practice into an empty office we'd converted just for her. next door to my corner room with its peeling paint and stained floors. She made me promise I'd get the roof fixed this summer. Your empire's not much use if the ceiling collapses on your head, she teased. I promised. I lied. There were always bigger fires to put out. ... I didn't hear from Alistair for weeks. Rumors said he'd fled to Spain, or Mexico, or maybe just another round of the same bars he'd always haunted. I stopped checking. The last appeal failed in court. The last shares he claimed slipped through his fingers like water through a cracked cup. But ghosts don't vanish just because you tell them to. Some nights, I'd wake up at the factory, the floorboards creaking under footsteps that weren't there. I'd stand in the dark, listening for the door to open, for his voice to drip poison in my ear again. It never did. The bramble roses out back were enough of a warning sign. This place wasn't his anymore. One afternoon, I got a letter. Not from Alistair. He wouldn't waste a stamp on me. It was from Mother. Her handwriting was as neat and cold as the woman herself. Cordelia, asterisk. I hope you're happy now. The house is empty. Your father's gone most days. Alistair doesn't call. I suppose that's what you wanted. I always thought you'd come back. You were my good girl once. I don't know who you are now. It was Mother. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The roses answered for me. ... By May, the last old debts were nearly cleared. Gary brought the ledger to my office one morning, his big hands smudged with engine grease. It's almost done, Dee, he said, dropping the file on my desk. After this, you'll owe nobody nothing. Except the people in this building, I said. He grinned, a flash of yellowed teeth. That's the only debt worth having. I flipped through the pages, running my thumb over each signed line. Father's signature, Alistair's scrawl. My name, neat and deliberate under every single one. The girl they'd once called an afterthought had bought them out. Penny by penny, lie by lie. Jeannie brought in a cake that afternoon, store-bought, frosted with shaky letters that read, "Thank you, boss." The crew crowded into the break room, plates in hand, laughter echoing off the steel walls. Someone found an old speaker and piped in music that bounced off the concrete floors. For a moment, the ghosts went quiet. Julianne found me outside after everyone left, sitting on the loading dock steps with the last slice of cake balanced on my knee. "It's done," she said. I looked out across the yard, the roses trembling in the dusk breeze. "Not really, but it's enough." She nudged my shoulder. "What now?" I licked a smear of frosting off my thumb. "Now? We fix the roof. Pay a few people what they're worth. Maybe get that sign changed." She laughed. "Harper and Root?" I shrugged. "Why not? I've dug enough of them up, might as well plant something better." ... I stayed late that night, wandering the halls with nothing but the hum of old machines for company. In the main office, I found a box of old family photographs shoved in the back of a cabinet. Alistair at graduation. Mother in her garden. Father at the annual shareholders' dinner, hand tight on my brother's shoulder. There was one of me, too. Sitting cross-legged on the factory floor as a kid, oil smudged on my jeans, grinning up at Gary like he'd just told me a secret. I pinned it above my desk. The girl I used to be. The one they'd overlooked. She'd done all right. At the gate, the brambles swayed in the wind. Tiny buds pressed against the rusted fence, white petals catching the moonlight, roots stubborn enough to crack concrete, soft enough to bloom anyway. I took a breath that tasted like steel and roses and freedom. For the first time in my life, it didn't taste like debt. Back inside, I grabbed a can of black paint. I climbed the ladder by the main sign, brush in hand, and painted over the "and S-O-N." The letters dripped in the dark, fresh, and final. The new name glowed under the humming light. Harper. Asterisk. Asterisk. No more heirs. No more ghosts. Just me. Just us. Just the people who'd stayed, who'd believed. ... A week later, I walked the floor one last time before shutting down for the holiday. Gary found me by the break room, where Jeannie was taping up a crooked Employee of the Month photo of the newest hire, a kid barely 20. "You did good, Dee," he said. I reached out, tracing my finger over the frame. "No," I said. "We did." He laughed. "So what now, boss?" I turned to the window, where the roses pressed against the glass, wild and alive. "Now we grow." 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications.